Here's Rineman in the Morning, on demand from 102.1 and 105.3, The Shark.
Please welcome to Rineman in the Morning, the one and only Paul Reiser. Paul, how's it going, sir?
Oh, good. Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now, you're coming here to do two shows in New Hampshire. You're going to be in Manchester and Laconia. Now, as someone who's toured all over, what comes to mind when you, Paul Reiser, think New Hampshire?
Beautiful, green, and you know what? I remember because I used to spend my summers in New Hampshire. When I was a kid, I went to a summer camp in Bristol, in New Hampshire, and what I remember from as a kid coming from New York, I remember being thrown that the hot dog rolls are square and flat. I don't know what somewhere between New York and New Hampshire, they made a decision that they won't be round, but sort of flat on the edge. I liked it, but I was thrown. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, those edges, a little bit scary, right? On the hot dog
yeah,
rolls.
Like a lobster roll kind of thing. It's like, all right, if that's what you want to do, you can do it, but it's just a little wrong.
I love that. You can do whatever you want. It's just not right. That's all.
It's just not right. It's not what I would do if I was in charge.
That's going to.
But I'm always happy to learn. Always happy to expand my horizons.
What are some of your favorite early gigs, stand-up wise, performing here in New England? When you think back.
Oh man, I remember there was a comedy club in Boston that was sort of underneath a pub, and it was like the comedy equivalent of the Beatles Cavern Club. It was just smoky, dark, and somehow still fun. But I remember playing colleges in the Boston area, and you know, there's a lot of shows you do, and I was talking to somebody and said, when do you think you started learning really how to do it? I said, it's years. Yeah, I remember the first time I went up on stage, I was still in college. I was 18, wow. And I did 5 minutes, and I was terrible, but I didn't know it. Because thankfully, when you're young, you think, well, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Like, only years later, you go, oh, that was not good at all.
Yeah.
But it takes a while. And so, luckily, it's been a while. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm having a great time now. And, you know, it's really been fun. This last run of shows, they've all been sold out, and audiences have been great all over the place. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to New Hampshire. It's been a while.
Well, you know, we're happy to have you here in New Hampshire because there's kind of a weird thing people in New Hampshire are fascinated by. People here really love to talk about UFOs, and I bring this up, of course, because you starred in Aliens, so we have sort of an expert. But I got to ask you, Paul, what have you been making of all these stories lately, these spy balloons and these UFOs? Do you get worried or not so much when you hear about these?
First of all, no, I don't get, to answer your question, no, I don't get worried. A balloon is not a UFO. No. We know what it was. It was a balloon with a camera from China. You should be worried for other reasons, but not because of alien. But I didn't realize, till you just told me, that New Hampshire is apparently a hotbed of that discussion. Why is that?
I think it's just because it's, I don't know, we're just happy to meet people that aren't us sometimes. We're just...
we're so tired of each other.
Yeah.
We're hoping. Yeah.
Well, I always say to people, I go, you want aliens? I go, of course. I go, well, tell me the names of your next door neighbors. Well, I don't know. I don't think you're ready for aliens yet. That's what I say.
That's really fun. But let me ask you this. What if another civilization came, met you all, and went, yeah, no, we're going to stay where we are.
Exactly.
Because then you'd feel even worse.
Or if they're just dumber than us, and then all of a sudden we have to hang out with them.
That's going to be hard to beat. That I think we're very special in our dumbness.
Yes.
I don't mean New Hampshire. I mean us as a civilization.
That's very true.
We have cornered the market on dumbness.
We have, but I had a good education because I grew up watching you and Helen Hunt and the brilliant sitcom Mad About You, a favorite for my family and my parents. But I didn't know this.
Oh, that's nice.
I didn't know this till recently. You wrote the theme song to Mad About You?
Yes. If you ever hum it, I get a nickel.
Oh, really? I'm going to do it more often now.
Please. The more you hum, the better. The more things we can buy in my home. Yeah, that was. I actually wrote that with Don Was, who's a brilliant, very producer, musician. And about 2 weeks before the show premiered in 1992, Helen Hunt and myself were flying to New York to do some publicity, and in the airport bumped into Don Was and started chatting. And he said, "Well, what's your theme song?" I said, we have one, but I don't really like it. He goes, "Well, let's you and me write one. You're a musician." I went, "Well, we'd have to do it like soon." He goes, "Let's do it tonight." I went, "Okay." We went into the studio and wrote this little thing, and then a week later, he brought in like the best music. He brought in all of Bonnie Raitt's band. He produced all of Bonnie Raitt's album.
Oh, wow.
So I suddenly had all these great musicians, and Andrew Gold, who was a singer who I was a big fan of, brought in to sing the original theme song. And you know what I found out recently?
What's that?
And I didn't know this till recently. A lot of people have gotten married to that theme song. They've chosen that song to walk down the aisle because it's about a relationship, and it's about committing, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense, but that I never knew that, and it's really kind of sweet to be part of people's lives like that.
It is very sweet, and you know what I think I suggest is if people get divorced, they use the Stranger Things song.
What? And then it come full circle. I don't get a piece of that action, but you know what? It's a lovely way to end a terrible marriage.
Yeah, the upside down's over.
Yes, exactly.
But you've done a lot of music. You play piano, right?
I play piano. I was a music major in college with no idea what I was going to do. I just thought I played piano. I liked music, and I thought, well, I'll just do this. And then I got out and got into comedy. And so I always play piano, but I really just for myself. That I've never really done it much in public. But that's because the public insists that I keep it to myself. They go, "Hey, you know what, pal? Take that inside. We don't need that."
Well, say you go into a piano bar. You go somewhere and there's an empty piano, and people say, "Come on, Paul. Say what's your go-to song?" When you sit down at that piano.
Well, the minute I sit down, Billy Joel comes out, and it's just I'm a big Billy Joel fan, and so and it lends itself. He's a piano guy, so
yeah.
A lot of I don't know which song comes out first. It's usually slow, very slow, in the sad songs. I'm a big sucker for sad songs.
You just sit down and play "We Didn't Start the Fire."
Yeah, and people start crying in their beers, going, "Get this guy out of here! Make sure he plays in this house."
I was very excited to see this because we love nostalgia here, and this was awesome. You're in the new Beverly Hills Cop, and it's everybody. It's you. It's
Beverly Hills Cop 4, because apparently 3 was not enough for people. We want a 4th one.
Yes, it's you. Well, I want a 4th. It's you. It's Eddie Murphy, Judge Reinhold. Bronson Pinchot is back.
Yeah.
Have you finished shooting? Or are you still working?
Yeah, that finished in December. I only did a little part in it. I have a little part. I shot in August, and they were filming all the way till December, so it went on for a while. And what I did, and I did this in the first one too, I gave Eddie Murphy the big role, and you know what?
Yes.
And I stepped back because I just took a little part.
Yep.
Because that's just the kind of person I am,
yeah.
And it did seem to help his career, so I'm happy about that.
God bless. God bless.
Yes, very generous of me.
When you saw those guys, that whole crew, and when they said action, did you guys pick up where you left off, or was it?
Well, it's crazy because you get into that world, and I before we even did the first Beverly Hills Cop, I knew Eddie from the comedy clubs, so it was really comfortable to begin with. But suddenly looking at each other, going, it was 40 years ago we did this the first time, and we have kids. He has grandkids.
Yeah.
I met Eddie. He was 19. It's just
amazing.
Crazy. But I haven't seen it. I'm sure it's going to be great.
And now you're coming to New Hampshire,
Manchester on May 19th, and on May 20th it'll be Lebanon at the Lebanon Opera House. Although there'll be no opera, I will not be singing. You'll be relieved to hear.
Yeah, no mad about you song that night.
If you hum it, I get the nickel, so that's good.
What kind of things are you looking forward to discussing with the great audiences here in New Hampshire?
Well, here's what I'm going to... And I promise people, I say that everything I say, there will be nothing of any importance shared. It'll all... And people go... I say, we're not going to talk about anything that's happening in the world, and people actually are clapping. They're going, thank you.
Yes.
We were so happy. And I tell people, I'm not smart enough to make anything up. So what I do, I just tell people, here's what happened in my house. And I talk about my family and my kids, and everybody's laughing because they're going, oh, brother, man, that sounds like our house. So we're all going through the same things together. And so it does seem to be a relief to people to just come and have an evening of let's laugh really hard and then go home and with nothing important. So it's going to be a great fun night.
Before you go, I love the story I heard you tell once about when you were growing up and the great George Carlin came to your house. And it was,
imagine that.
And it was one of your siblings was doing an interview, right?
Yes.
Would you mind telling that story? Because this made me
that
laugh.
was just I was a huge George Carlin fan, and my older sister had a college radio show, and somehow it finagled him to do an interview, and they were going to do it where he could do it, but anyway, he ended up coming to our house, and I was out of the house when he got there. And when I came in, like, George Carlin is sitting in my kitchen, and he had done like a 2-hour taped interview, and some of which I actually gave Judd Apatow did a George Carlin documentary, and a little snippet of it, I gave him the tape. I said, "You're not going to believe it. I have a tape of George in my house, 1972," and he was, brilliant and wonderful. And at the end, we ended up. I don't know if this is the part where we took him for a ride. That's the story.
Yes.
So he had to. He was sitting with her, and he had to. He said, "Listen, I got to go." And my father said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I got to go uptown." And my father said, "What are you going uptown for?" And he went, "I got to buy a camera." My father said, "Don't go uptown. I'll take you downtown. I got a place. My friend will get you." And he said, "No." He kind of browbeat him into getting into the car, drove him downtown, made him buy a camera. Years later, my sister meets him again, and she said, "I don't know if you remember, you came to my house years ago and did an interview." He said, "Oh, I'll never forget that." He said, "All I remember is I was on my way uptown to score some coke, and next thing I know, I'm buying a camera." My father made him buy. He didn't want a camera. He was going to score a coke, and he made him buy a camera.
He's got to lug a big camera around
Yeah,
everywhere
all right.
he goes.
Thank you, Mr. Reiser.
Yeah. For tickets, visit paulreiser.com. My next guest, from his 4 decades anchoring the news here in New England, would you welcome to Rineman in the Morning, Randy Price. Randy, it's an honor, sir.
First of all, you make me sound so old.
I have to. That makes me feel young, though.
Well, listen, somewhere along the way, you and I were together, and it's been a few years for that, but we were there at Channel 7 in Boston, and you were there entertaining me behind the scenes.
Yes.
And doing some other stuff as well.
Well, that's something I want to bring up. We worked together at Channel 7, and one of my favorite memories is you'd come into my office, we'd watch news bloopers together. That's just one of my favorite things to do. Are there any Boston news bloopers that stand out as favorites to you that you look back and you just always laugh?
You know something? There's so many of them. At this point, I'm doing my best just to remember the good things. So I probably have a mental block on all of the bad things. But, there are so many along the way, John, with crazy, mostly like just crazy things. I don't know that the viewer found them as humorous as we did, but, like you'd be there sitting and, of course, cameras are robotic. And, you would be talking, and then, of course, the camera would be going crazy and showing your colleague combing their hair or, panning down to your feet while you're trying to communicate a serious story. So things like that tickle you, or the lights overhead exploding and making everybody duck for cover in the studio like a gunshot had gone off. So many of, actually, I don't know that this would be my favorite blooper because it was one of the worst experiences of a career, but it did happen at Channel 7. And I don't know that you were there at that time, but we had this situation. And at that time, the 11 o'clock news at night was our most important newscast. So we put all of our, you used to promote it and everything,
yeah.
So
Yeah.
And we put all of our eggs in that basket. So we're going on the air one night, and the director, who is a great friend, and one awesome director, one of the best ever, comes to me ahead of time and says, "We're really having a technical meltdown in the studio, in the control room. Just heads up, we're going to do the best we can." So, I knew something was wrong. We go on the air. I have someone who's actually trying out with me that night, who was not my regular partner. And we go on, and absolutely nothing works. I mean, zero. So we come on, We can hear echo in our ears from, the system. We don't know whether the viewer can hear this or what's going on. We start, doing our bit, reading the first part of the story, and we throw it to the first reporter in the field, who I remember was Dan Housley that night.
Uh-huh.
And what the hell came up? It's actually on YouTube somewhere, so we can watch it together, John. But the truth is, it was like, you throw it to the reporter and something like a Coke commercial was there. And you do something else. It was just the opposite. Nothing worked. We actually just said goodbye and went off the air after a few minutes and threw it to one of the secondary networks that we carried. It was just an astounding experience.
I'm going to
Crazy things happen, when it's like people at home. Your computer is doing this one day and then that the next day, or your phone, there's always something going on with the technology, and you just try your best to keep up with it and be prepared for the moment. But oftentimes, I remember other more sort of mundane things, like in my days of reporting, I was along a major highway, and I'd been reporting on something, and I go to sign off, so I'm halfway through, and for so and so, I'm Randy Price, and at that moment, a big semi comes by and just splashes a big slob of mud in my face. So there's always something going on, but so many of them over the years, I can't. As I said, I try not to remember too many of those and just remember the good experiences that we had when things went well and you were proud of your work.
I think I found it. I'm going to post it on the Sharks Instagram. It's WHDH Meltdown, and I think that's it's on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I might even write about this too, because I love news bloopers. Let me just make sure this is the right.
Well,
yeah, there you are. It's you and let me see. I'm going to edit this, make it, but there you are. You're at the anchor desk and you're trying to, everything you're talking and everything's going wrong. And
and also keep in mind, for those who might watch this, this was a station renowned for its slickness, where things, were magical and quick and spontaneous and alive and high production value and everything. And we really looked like we were trying the 1950s there,
right.
And there actually were people who complained about us the next day when people were talking about it. They said, God, they can't even get to it. People just used to read from the desk. So they were imagining that we would just sit there for a half hour reading wire copy or whatever from, one of the wire, from the Associated Press. But it was a horrible experience, and one that really stands out as the worst of them all.
We all have one of those, though. Well, on the brighter side.
Yeah, there's a moment. Well, in every career, everybody has a worst moment, and that was one of my worst moments.
Well, on the brighter side, how is retirement treating you these days? Randy Price, you're in South Carolina, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you something. I have not a complaint. It is like the most wonderful world. I really enjoyed working. You and I had great times working together. I had many wonderful colleagues like yourself, and I had a tremendous amount. For what I was doing, I had a tremendous amount of success over many years with a great teams of people, because I was at 3 different stations. So I really enjoyed it. I worked until I was 72 years old, so I got the maximum amount out of that stuff, and I left before my deal was up, so to speak. My contract was up. I just really wanted to move on to what I'm doing now, and I'm having a great time. I decided that living in New England, while I love it, and I love the particular area where you are, because I lived there in Kittery Point for many, many years and enjoyed Portsmouth and all of that, greater Portsmouth area. But I'm not into the snow and ice anymore.
Right.
And we were always big gardeners, landscape gardeners. So we wanted to try something different where you had a year-round season. So we're doing that. We're biking all the time. We're traveling. In fact, next week I'm going for a couple of weeks to the Netherlands, where I always wanted to go there during. I've been there many times, but wanted to go there during gardening season. So we'll be biking through the countryside of the Netherlands, and then the next trip we're going to the UK for a while for a gardening extravaganza, and then we're going to Southeast Asia and Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand, where I lived for a year when I was in the United States Air Force. So we're just really having too good a time, and nothing's going. Health is great, and I've been able to focus on that. I've been trying to be more sensible. You remember my bad eating habit, where the sheet cake comes out for somebody's birthday, and I eat half of it myself. So I've tried to cut out that stuff and be more sensible and not be the biggest blob on the block.
Well, I remember there was some breaking story, and I remember it was about 2 minutes, I think, till it was going on. And so just in my head, I was like, yeah, they're going to be doing that in 2 minutes, as I went into either Starbucks or Dunkin's, and you're coming out of there with a donut. And I said, Randy, did you make it to your spot? And you said, I had donut in my teeth. That was your that was your response.
Well, as you know, it's a business of hauling ass. So, you're always like under the gun with the clock and and just getting in there. And there were a few times when I didn't get in there. So those are those bloopers that that nobody noticed because somebody else filled in for me. But living up there in Greater Portsmouth and working in Boston and driving in the afternoon commute time to be there for the night, that was always a bit of an ordeal, as you know. So there were times when I didn't make it for the 4 o'clock news. And somebody filled in for me.
Well, speaking of crazy news, I'm just going to get down to business here. Any big news story you watched this week? Was there anything on TV you were checking out?
Well, I usually watch just the clips.
Watching.
One of the things that I enjoy not doing is continuous coverage of stuff.
There you go.
There was a lot of it I just didn't enjoy, covering the weather nonstop or covering something nonstop. And it can be so repetitive. I mean, there are times when it's really important. One of the most remarkable mornings of my entire career was the day that we were covering live the manhunt for the 2 guys who had committed the marathon bombing.
Sure.
And I don't know if you recall, but I mean, it was, now I was at Channel 5 at that point, and you and I had parted ways, but it was just an extraordinary morning where things are happening everywhere. The governor was shutting down the public transit and so forth. And so, I mean, there were a lot of things where you felt like the viewers needed you for active live information. So I did, I can't say that I enjoyed, but you felt fulfilled by doing that stuff.
Yeah, you felt like it was worthwhile. You were helping people.
Yeah, you were serving, it was a public service, and you felt like you were doing something important for people's lives who were all like staying home instead of going to work and so forth and so on. So things like that, 9/11, all of those things were important stories where, you felt like there was a meaning to nonstop coverage. But, once I left it, I just generally don't do it. I like to watch the highlights, and I'm like everybody else, I like things on demand versus things that I'm waiting for on live television. Yeah, I watch a little bit of the Trump arraignment and things like that.
Well, I mean, you bring up do you think it sounds like, I feel like that might be the best way to consume news. Do you agree that maybe to stay up to date is just go for the clips, not just for your accuracy, but just your own sanity, right?
It is at the heart, John, of people's complaints. Those who want to pretend they don't like the media, like it's all fake. Part of their reason for that is that when it comes to all of the, say, cable news choices like CNN and MSNBC and Fox and Newsmax, they're on all the time. Mm-hmm. They have to resort to opinion makers being there. Yeah. So that's where it starts to seem fake, if you will, to people, because everyone has a different spin. So if you're watching Fox, they have their, boy, do they have their spin. And then if you're watching MSNBC, they have their spin. So that's where all the sort of, I think, distrust, so to speak, comes from, in that if you watch the continuous coverage of things, it goes beyond the actual events and starts to have a lot of feel and opinion in there. And that's where people, get tired of it and complain about it.
It also just feels like there's so much speculation instead of actual reporting.
Totally.
I mean, it seems like 80% of it is what might happen forever and ever and ever. I mean, this Trump thing's been going on for 3 weeks now. This might happen, and this might mean that. I mean, do you feel in any way, and they justify it by saying, well, Trump drives ratings. I don't know. Do you feel that's effective, or do you think it might be more effective to say, like, we'll get back to this when the story happens. Here's the other news that's going on that we could report on. Would that be better, maybe?
I try to find a general news program. So for a while, he's not on anymore, but I was watching Shepard Smith because he does he was on CNBC.
Oh, I love Shepard.
Network. Yeah, and he did a general news program. So, he would have the Trump stuff, this Trump craziness, and whatever, and the response to it. And, but they moved on to other news. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. Like if you, every now and then, if you dip into like the BBC on radio, and you're just reminded, oh my God, we spend so much time immersed in these sort of minuscule stories about Donald Trump and the reaction to Donald Trump, and the world is full of a lot of things going on that are way more important.
Tell me about it.
So you need to I always recommend to people, find a generalist program. And I hate to it just amazes me that I am saying stuff like this, but I always say, don't watch too much. Don't watch a whole lot of news.
Wow.
Watch a general news program. I actually think you can get enough in a half-hour program. Read a paper. Listen to, enjoy your life. Enjoy the John Rineman extravaganza on radio and just have a good time. People are so wound up on, if I listen to the Trump people, the country is coming to an end, and you listen to the other side, and Donald Trump is this, and that. It's just like the world of political posturing, and it's really not that important to your life. Your life is your local community. And most of us have a pretty good situation and live in a great place. If you live there in Portsmouth, it's a pretty good world. And there's really not a whole lot to complain about. Plus, your life is pretty short. All of our lives will be pretty short. Enjoy.
Amen. Before I let you go, though, I want to ask you about this. And, you're a pioneer in that you were the first openly gay newscaster on television, which in 2023... Not a big deal, but 25 years ago, it made headlines. Were there any people in Boston news who were especially helpful to you in the years that you maintained your privacy, and also when you decided the time was right to go public with how you live your life?
Well, listen, my colleagues were always great. And for the most part, all of my colleagues and probably competitors knew I was gay. So it wasn't a big deal to them. Mm-hmm. It was that those kinds of things weren't discussed in that time. And that is what made it kind of remarkable. And I have to say, John, that it was really, I've certainly heard of a few things that were negative, but for the most part, I didn't focus on any of that business. There were so many young people in the business who reached out to me as a result of that, like, how did it go? and a lot of them were in smaller markets where it wasn't going to be possible to be who I could be in Boston. But it started to, and now when you look around, there's an endless number of LGBT people in the industry, whether it's Anderson Cooper or Shepard Smith or Don Lemon or a whole bunch of other people. The world has changed, and I'm proud and happy to see that. It's not something that needs to be discussed at this point, but it did at that point because people wanted to know who you were. You're either going to lie to them about who you are, or you're just going to tell them the truth, and then we all can move on. It was a long time ago. We've all moved on.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing really isn't that important. My life is my life. I mean, it's what I really loved about New England, in that there was that sort of Yankee mentality there, like your business is your business and my business is my business. So for the most part, it was pretty easy for me, and I got a lot of support and wonderful things. And I would tell you this, rather than it being a negative, the better part of my career came after that.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I think that a lot of people reasoned it this way, John. They said, he's there to tell me to report the truth. So if he's not truthful about himself, then I probably should be suspect about what he's telling me. So I think a lot of people respected that and thought, okay, that's a story. Enough. No, I got it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Don Lemon, and so it's like, so he was in the news just recently. They've been going after him for weeks now. There's all these stories of misogyny and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, then people at CNN have been saying that the way he treats women, and I'm not trying to belittle or beleaguer or any of that. I'm not saying that that's not valid, and maybe he does behave that way. However, a trend I've noticed, though, is you look at people in the media, it's Rosie O'Donnell, it's Ellen, it's Don Lemon. And there's still, do you think that still exists, sadly, a little bit, that there is some subtle, preferential treatment towards some people while maybe others are sadly the target of some of these stories? It just seems to me like I see some of these people get targeted, and, you and I have worked in the business. I'm not going to name names, but I'm thinking to myself, boy, I've met a lot of straight people who have done a lot of these things, and I don't read any stories about them. And do you think we still have a ways to go to really kind of get to some?
Well, I mean, I think that there's always and always will be a certain amount of prejudice about other people for a variety of reasons, whether it's, gay, straight, or whatever. And there's a lot of discrimination. But I think that, a lot of stuff gets exaggerated. Now, I don't know, and I'm not vouching for any of these people that you just mentioned, but I think that there's a way that a lot of things get exaggerated and out of hand. And that is not to say that those things are not happening. I don't really know. But I think you have to just sort of keep an open mind and balance it all out. I tend to think that people who get accused by more than one person of a type of behavior generally are guilty.
Yeah,
so
it's fair. Statistically, at least, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. I mean, if you treat your colleagues well, and you're a good person, people are not going out and bad mouthing you and criticizing you. So I think that there is always a certain amount of truth to a consensus of opinions about people and whether they, it's just like, because this is pretty well founded. You go back to, what's his name on the Today Show, Matt Lauer.
Yep.
It wasn't just one person. There's a pattern of behavior that was extensive. So he didn't get railroaded out of the business. He appropriately got pushed out of the business. So I think that there's always a certain amount of truth when there's more than one person. But you're always, when you're in the public arena, you're always a potential target.
Well, what advice would you give to prospective aspiring journalists who may be struggling with similar decisions? Maybe it's not even their, gay, straight. Maybe it's someone who had battled depression or had been,
Right.
had to go be hospitalized or had addiction problems or something that they may feel maybe not so proud about, and they haven't gotten to that point where they can own it, but they really want to break into the business. What would you say to them to just make them go forward, not worry about the so-called skeletons in their closet?
Well, and we all have a little baggage somewhere. If
Yeah.
you want to call it that.
Yep.
I would say this. This is not just in our industry, John. It's in pretty much any business. If you treat your colleagues with respect, and cherish their contribution more than your own, you'll always have people who are there for you. So whatever your struggle, if you want to call it that, may be, you're going to have people in your corner. Believe me, I had way more serious things than being gay that I had to deal with in my career. And I'll just go ahead and say it since we're talking. I had an episode of drunken driving, and it nearly ended my career. And I changed my life, and I had a lot of people, a lot of people, whether they're colleagues and managers in the industry, and most importantly, and I cherish, viewers who rally for you, who say, you know what, you had your problems, you're trying to rectify what you've done, and they rally for you. So whether you suffer with mental illness or you suffer with, whether it's depression or drug addiction or alcohol addiction or whatever, if you reach out, you treat people fairly, and you honor their contribution to you, I think that you'll find that it will work out well for you in the end. It certainly did for me.
That's why he's the best. Thank you to Randy Price, and thank you to Paul Reiser, and thank you for listening to Rineman in the Morning on Demand.